I stood inside the closed meeting room, watching the branch director turn pale. He looked at the company attorney like he might call the police right then. Finally, he spoke the words that stole the air from my lungs. This policy is active. The claim value is roughly $2.3 million. But the problem was not the money. The problem was that someone had spent 4 years trying to steal it from me, and that person carried my last name. My name is Lucy Johnson, and I was currently sitting in a room that felt less like an office and more like a sterile containment unit. The air conditioning in the conference room at Prairie Crest Life and Mutual was set to a temperature that I was certain violated some kind of workplace safety ordinance. It was freezing. The cold air blasted from a vent directly above my head and made the fine hairs on my arms stand up, but I did not move. I did not dare to move. I sat with my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide the fact that they were shaking. On the polished mahogany table in front of me lay a piece of paper that looked like it had survived a war. It was wrinkled, stained with a ring of dark roast coffee, and possessed a faint but undeniable odor of stale bagels and wet cardboard. It was an embarrassment in a room defined by sharp suits and sharper edges. That piece of paper was a life insurance policy document that my sister had thrown into a dumpster less than 24 hours ago. Across from me sat Graham Whitaker. He was the branch director and a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in mid-level corporate anxiety. He had been typing furiously on his computer for the last 5 minutes, but now his hands were still. He was staring at his monitor with a complexion that had gone from a healthy beige to the color of uncooked dough. He reached for his desk phone. His hand hovered over the receiver. He looked at the door. Then he looked back at the screen. He seemed to be debating whether to call security or a priest. "Please tell me this is a mistake," I said. My voice sounded thin and brittle in the large room. I just wanted to check if it was valid. My sister said it was trash. Whitaker did not answer me immediately. He pressed a button on his intercom instead. "Lydia, get in here, now. Bring the red file on policy number 849. The voice that came back was sharp and immediate. "I am already on my way." "Graham?" The door opened 10 seconds later. Lydia Crowley walked in. She was the company attorney, and she moved with the silent, lethal grace of a predator entering a clearing. She did not smile. She did not offer me water. She carried a thick folder clamped under her arm like a weapon. She took the seat next to Whitaker and placed the folder on the table. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the wood echoed like a gunshot. Whitaker finally looked at me. He cleared his throat, but the sound was wet and nervous. "Ms. Johnson, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The document you retrieved from the garbage is not trash. It is an active whole-life policy." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "Okay, that is good. So it covers the funeral costs. The service at Kirkwood Memorial was expensive, and my mother put everything on credit." Whitaker looked at Lydia. Lydia gave him a single sharp nod, giving him permission to proceed. Whitaker turned his screen slightly so he could read the data without showing me the confidential display. "It covers significantly more than the funeral, Ms. Johnson. We have finished our preliminary calculation, including the accrued interest and the dividends that have been reinvested over the last 40 years. The total claim value is approximately $2.3 million. The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. My vision blurred for a second. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from sliding out of the chair. "No," I whispered. "That is impossible. You have the wrong person." "Ms. Johnson, I assure you the Social Security number matches." "You do not understand," I said, my voice rising slightly. "We are talking about Eleanor Johnson. My grandmother washed out Ziploc bags to reuse them. She drove a 1998 Ford until the floorboard rusted through because she refused to buy a new car. She clipped coupons for canned soup. She did not have $2 million. She did not have $200,000. Whitaker leaned forward. His eyes were intense. "She lived that way for a reason, Ms. Johnson. Every cent she saved, every dividend she earned, every premium she paid, it all went here. She was building a fortress." He tapped the stained paper I had brought in. "But that is not the problem," he continued. "The problem is not the money. We are prepared to pay the claim. The problem is, what has been happening to this policy for the last 4 years? Lydia Crowley opened the folder she had brought in. She did not slide it gently. She pushed it across the table with force. The first page was covered in red ink. There were stamps that read, "Rejected and invalid," all over it. "We have flagged this policy for high-level fraud monitoring for 48 months, Whitaker said. Since you are the confirmed beneficiary and the policyholder is now deceased, we can finally show you this." I looked down at the documents. They were change of beneficiary forms, dozens of them. Some were filled out in messy handwriting and some were typed. Some were faxed and some were mailed. They all had one thing in common. They were attempts to remove my name and replace it with another. I felt a cold, sick feeling spreading in my stomach. It was the kind of nausea that had nothing to do with illness and everything to do with betrayal. I looked at the line labeled "Requested Beneficiary." The name was typed clearly. Sloan Johnson, my sister. I closed my eyes. I saw her face at the funeral yesterday. I saw her perfect black dress and her perfect tears. I saw her snatch this envelope from my hand and tell me it was just old junk that Grandma kept around because she was senile. She knew, I said. The realization tasted like copper in my mouth. She knew about the money. She did not just know, Whitaker said. She has been trying to access it since 2021. Lydia Crowley pointed a manicured finger at a specific document near the bottom of the pile. Look at the dates. Ms. Johnson. The request started small. A simple address change. Then a request to change the power of attorney. Then the beneficiary change forms started coming. We rejected the first one because the signature did not match your grandmother's specimen card on file. I looked at the signature on the form. It was a shaky attempt to copy my grandmother's elegant cursive. It looked nothing like the steady hand of the woman who had taught me how to balance a checkbook. They tried again, Lydia said, and again, and again, 9 times in 4 years. The methods got more sophisticated. They started using digital notary stamps. They sent forms from different fax numbers to avoid tracking. Whitaker pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. We blocked them all. Our fraud department flagged the account after the second attempt. We put a lock on it that required in-person verification for any changes. That is why the money is still here. If we had been less vigilant, this account would have been drained years ago and you would have found nothing but an empty file. I stared at the name Sloan Johnson on the paper. I thought about the text message she had sent me this morning. She had told me to get some rest. She had told me not to worry about the paperwork. She was trying to buy time. She probably thought she had succeeded when she threw the policy in the trash. She thought she had buried the evidence. Whitaker picked up his phone again. This time he did not hesitate. "I need to make a call to our compliance department," he said, "and then I need to make a second call." He looked at me with a strange expression. It was a mix of pity and fear. I realized then that this was not just a meeting about an insurance payout. This was a crime scene. "Who is the second call to?" I asked. Whitaker ignored the question. He punched a 4-digit extension into the landline. "This is Whitaker, branch 14, code red on the Johnson file. Yes, she is here. The primary. Yes, the policy is secure, but we have a situation. Initiate the protocol." He hung up. Lydia Crowley closed the folder. She rested her hands on top of it. She looked at me, and for the first time her expression softened just a fraction. It was not kindness exactly. It was respect. "Ms. Johnson, there is something you need to know." "What is it?" I asked. "Your grandmother knew this was happening." I froze. "She knew she came here," Lydia said. 11 months ago. She took a taxi. She could barely walk, but she came into this office and demanded to see the director and the general counsel." Whitaker nodded. "I remember it clearly. She sat right where you're sitting. She made us print out every single rejected attempt. She looked at them. She did not cry. She did not get angry. She just nodded like she expected it." Lydia leaned forward. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We offered to involve the authorities then. We told her we could file charges for attempted fraud. We told her we could stop your sister. Do you know what she said?" I shook my head. I could not speak. "She told us no." Lydia said. "She said to let them keep trying. She said to document everything. She told us to build the file. Why, I whispered. Why would she do that? Lydia paused. She wanted to make sure I heard every word. She said exactly this. When I die, they will come. They will come like vultures. Do not give the papers to them. Do not let them touch this money. You wait for Lucy. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. I would not cry in front of these corporate strangers. She knew you would come, Whitaker said gently. She told us that you were the only one who would bother to look. She said the others would be too arrogant or too lazy. She said you would be the one to check the details. He stood up. He walked over to a safe built into the wall behind his desk. He punched in a code and the heavy steel door swung open. He reached inside and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was not a standard company envelope. It was thick and yellowed. On the front in my grandmother's distinct handwriting were written the words, "For Lucy only." Whitaker placed the envelope in front of me. She left this for you, he said. She instructed us to give it to you only after we verified your identity and confirmed that the original policy had been presented. I reached out and touched the envelope. It felt heavy. Whitaker sat back down. He looked at me with a gravity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Ms. Johnson, I want you to understand the position you are in. This is not a lottery win. This is not a gift. He gestured to the phone he had just used. The second call I have to make is to a special investigator from the State Insurance Board. Because what your sister did is not just a family dispute, it is a felony. And based on what your grandmother showed us 11 months ago, this goes beyond just your sister. He looked me dead in the eye. You are not just a beneficiary, Lucy. You are the person your grandmother chose to pull the trigger. She set a trap. She baited it with $2.3 million, and she left you the key to spring it. I looked from Whitaker to Lydia, and then down to the envelope. The room felt smaller now. The air felt thinner. The reality of what was happening crashed down on me. My grandmother had not just left me money. She had left me a weapon, and she expected me to use it. I picked up the envelope. My hand was steady now. The shock had burned away, leaving something cold and hard in its place. Make the call, I said to Whitaker. He nodded slowly. He picked up the receiver. I sat back in the chair and waited. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, the office continued its mundane rhythm of phones ringing and keyboards clacking. But inside the room, everything had changed. The quiet life I had built for myself in Maplewood was over. The job I had auditing freight bills was about to seem very small. My sister had started a war over this money. She thought she was fighting a confused old woman. She thought she was fighting a pushover of a little sister. She was wrong. She was fighting Eleanor Johnson, and Eleanor Johnson had been preparing for this fight for 40 years. I watched Whitaker dial the number. I thought about the trash can in the parking lot where I had found my future. I thought about the way Sloane had looked at me at the funeral, and for the first time since I walked into the room, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready to understand why I was sitting in that frozen conference room with a multi-million-dollar secret in my lap. You have to understand the life I lived before I walked through those glass doors. You have to understand the specific type of invisibility that I had perfected over 34 years. I live in Maplewood, which is a perfectly adequate suburb of St. Louis. It is not the wealthy enclave of Clayton where the lawyers and the doctors park their luxury SUVs, and it is not the historic charm of Kirkwood where families fight over craftsman bungalows. Maplewood is sensible. It is a place for people who are starting out or people who have stalled out. I suspect I belong to the second category. My apartment is a one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a complex that was built in the 1970s. The carpet is a neutral beige that has seen better decades, and the kitchen cabinets are a laminate wood that peels at the corners if you look at it too hard. It costs me $1,200 a month. I pay it on the first of every month without fail. I drive a 2012 Ford Focus that has 114,000 miles on the odometer. It has a rattle in the muffler when I accelerate past 40 miles per hour, but it runs. That is the word that defined my existence. It ran. It worked. It was stable. I was stable. Most people would call my life boring. My sister Sloane called it sad, but she usually said it with a smile that suggested she enjoyed the tragedy of it. But I liked the stability. I like the predictability of my days because my job required a level of attention that left no room for drama. I work as a senior analyst for Redwood Lane Freight Audits. It is a company that nobody has ever heard of, and that is exactly how we make money. Companies hire us to look at their shipping invoices. My entire professional life consists of staring at rows of numbers and codes on dual monitors. I look for the mistakes that nobody else sees. I look for the carrier who charged for a liftgate service that was never used. I look for the package that was weighed at 50 pounds but billed for 70. I look for the fuel surcharge that was calculated on the wrong week's index. To most people, a freight bill is just a piece of paper that you pay to get your goods moving. To me, it is a crime scene. Every decimal point and every zone code is a potential lie. My boss tells me I have a gift for spotting discrepancies. He says I have the eyes of a hawk, but the soul of an actuary. I do not think he means it as a compliment, but I take it as one. It is a survival skill. However, this skill did not make me popular at family gatherings. In the Johnson household, facts were often treated as optional suggestions rather than absolute realities. We would be sitting at Thanksgiving dinner and my mother Diane would be telling a story about how her neighbor's dog attacked her. She would be building up the drama and describing the blood and the terror. And I would be the one to interrupt. I would ask a simple question. I would ask if that was the same neighbor who moved to Florida 3 months ago. The table would go silent. My mother would sigh the heavy sigh of a martyr. "Lucy, why do you always have to ruin the flow?" she would say. I was not trying to ruin the flow. I was trying to clarify the timeline. But in my family, clarification was viewed as aggression. I was the difficult one. I was the pedantic one. I was the one who could not just let things be nice. Then there was Sloane. If I was the fine print that nobody wanted to read, then Sloane was the billboard on the highway. She is 2 years older than me, and she has always been the protagonist of the family narrative. Sloane does not walk into a room. She arrives. She has the kind of beauty that demands acknowledgement. She has dark hair that always looks professionally blown out, and a smile that she can turn on like a 100-watt bulb. Sloane was never stable. Sloane was spectacular. Her life was a series of high-stakes dramas. There were always boyfriends who were misunderstood geniuses or business ventures that were guaranteed to make millions or crises that required immediate financial intervention. And she was always forgiven. That was the rule. Sloane messed up and Mom fixed it. Sloane broke things and Mom swept up the glass. My mother Diane is a woman who values peace above all else. She believes that if you do not talk about a problem, it ceases to exist. She operates on a philosophy of toxic positivity. If Sloane borrowed $500 from me and never paid it back, Mom would tell me to let it go for the sake of family unity. She would say that money is just paper, but sisterhood is forever. She never seemed to realize that sisterhood does not pay the electric bill. There was only one person in my life who did not view my obsession with facts as a character flaw. Eleanor Johnson. My grandmother was not the type of grandmother you read about in children's books. She did not bake cookies. She did not knit sweaters. She smelled like peppermint and old paper and cheap cigarettes, which she smoked in secret on her back porch until the day she died. She had spent 40 years working as the bookkeeper for a machine shop in North Street, Lewis. It was a rough place full of men who thought they could fudge the numbers on inventory or payroll. Eleanor ate them for breakfast. She knew every bolt and every screw in that warehouse. She knew when a mechanic was padding his hours. She knew when a supplier was shorting them on steel. She was the one who taught me how to look at a document. I remember sitting at her kitchen table when I was 10 years old. She had a stack of grocery store receipts in front of her. "Lucy," she would say, her voice rasping like sandpaper. "Look at this tax line. They charged me for the non-food items tax on a bag of apples. Apples are food. They owe me 14 cents. She would march back to the store for those 14 cents. It was never about the money. It was about the principle. It was about the truth. One afternoon when I was about 16 years old, I learned exactly where I stood in the hierarchy of my family. It was my birthday. I had come home from school expecting perhaps a cake or a dinner out. Instead, I found the house in chaos. Sloane had just broken up with her boyfriend of 3 months. She was crying on the sofa. She was throwing throw pillows across the room. She was threatening to drop out of community college because her heart was shattered. My mother was hovering over her with tea and sympathy. She was stroking Sloane's hair. She was making phone calls to cancel her evening plans so she could stay home and comfort her grieving daughter. I stood in the doorway with my backpack still on my shoulders. I waited for someone to look up. I waited for someone to remember that it was the 16th of October. Nobody did. I went to my room and closed the door. I did not cry. I sat at my desk and did my calculus homework. I solved for x. I found the derivative. I focused on the math because math did not forget you. Math did not prioritize the loud over the correct. Later that night, there was a knock on my door. It was Grandma Eleanor. She did not live with us, but she had come over for dinner, which had obviously been canceled. She walked in and sat on the edge of my bed. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a $50 bill and a card. She did not say happy birthday. She did not apologize for my mother or my sister. She just looked at me with those sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "You are the quiet one, Lucy," she said. "That is good. The loud ones are the first to get caught." I asked her what she meant. She tapped the side of her head. "People look at Sloane and they see a show. They look at your mother and they see a doormat. They look at you and they see nothing. Use that. You watch them. You keep the receipts. You trust what you can prove, and you never trust what you want to believe." That advice became my religion. Trust what you prove. Over the last few years, as Eleanor's health began to decline, the dynamic in the family shifted. Sloane suddenly became very interested in Grandma's well-being. Sloane, who had never visited the machine shop or asked about the bookkeeping days, started showing up at Eleanor's small house in Kirkwood. She brought flowers. She brought takeout food. She posted photos on social media with captions about her beloved Nana. I saw it for what it was. I saw the way Sloane's eyes darted around the living room, assessing the value of the antique clock or the silver tea set. I saw the way she asked questions about the house deed. I told my mother. I told Diane that Sloane was sniffing around for an inheritance. Diane told me I was being cynical. She said Sloane was maturing. She said it was beautiful to see the bond between generations. She told me I should be more like Sloane and show more affection. But Eleanor saw it too. 6 months before she died, I was over at her house helping her sort through her medical bills. She was frail then. Her hands shook when she held a pen, but her mind was still a steel trap. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "They are waiting," she whispered. "Who is waiting, Grandma?" I asked. "The vultures," she said. "They think I am senile. They think I forgot where I put the nuts for the winter." She looked at the stack of papers on the table. "Let them think it. You just keep your eyes open, Lucy. When the time comes, you read the fine print. Promise me." I promised her. I did not know exactly what I was promising, but I knew I would keep it. The end came on a Tuesday. It was a rainy, bleak Tuesday in November. I was at work auditing a complex invoice for a shipment of industrial piping from Ohio. My phone rang. It was the hospice nurse. Her voice was professional and kind but detached. She was doing a job. "She passed away peacefully 10 minutes ago," the nurse said. I thanked her. I hung up the phone. I stared at my computer screen. The numbers blurred for a second. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a profound loneliness that I had not expected. The only person who saw me was gone. I did not have time to process the grief. I did not have time to cry. My phone buzzed again. It was a text message. It was from Sloane. I looked at the timestamp. It had been less than 5 minutes since the nurse called me. Sloane must have been the first call on the contact list. I opened the message. I heard the news. "So sad. Mom is a mess. Can you make sure you grab any loose papers from her house before the paramedics or anyone else gets in there? We need to secure the documents for the estate. I will meet you there." I read the text 3 times. There was no heartbreak. There was no shock. There was only urgency. Secure the documents. I thought about Eleanor's voice. Trust what you prove. I looked at the text again. Sloane was not grieving. Sloane was hunting. I picked up my car keys and walked out of the office. I did not know then that she had already been hunting for 4 years. I did not know about the $2.3 million, but I knew my sister. and I knew that if Sloan Johnson wanted to secure the documents, I needed to get to them first. I drove my Ford Focus out of the parking lot and into the rain. I was grieving, but my eyes were dry. I was entering the mode I knew best. I was auditing the situation, and I had a feeling the numbers were not going to add up. The viewing at Kirkwood Memorial Chapel was less a funeral and more a networking event for the semi-bereaved. The room smelled of aggressive lilies and expensive floor wax. It was the kind of smell that was designed to mask the reality of death, but only succeeded in making the air feel thick and chemical. I stood near the back of the room by a station offering lukewarm coffee and small triangular sandwiches that were already curling at the edges. I was watching the room. It is a habit I cannot break. When you spend your life auditing freight bills, you start to audit everything else. I was auditing the grief in the room, and I was finding a significant deficit. Most of the people here had not seen my grandmother in a decade. There were cousins from the East Coast who were checking their watches and discussing airport traffic. There were neighbors who were more interested in the floral arrangements than the woman in the casket. I heard a conversation to my left about the rising property taxes in St. Louis County and a conversation to my right about a new Pilates studio in Clayton. Eleanor Johnson was just the excuse for them to put on suits and feel virtuous for an afternoon. My mother Diane was in her element. To Diane, a funeral was just a wedding in reverse. It required the same level of micromanagement and the same obsession with optics. She was wearing a black dress that was tasteful, but cut just low enough to show off her pearl necklace. She was moving through the room like a politician, shaking hands and accepting condolences with a practiced grace. She had organized the seating chart with the precision of a military strategist. The front row was reserved for the immediate family, which apparently meant her and Sloan. I had been assigned a seat in the second row behind an aunt who wore a hat so large it defied gravity. This was not an accident. In the theater of Diane's life, I was a supporting character. I was not photogenic enough for the front row. I did not cry prettily enough. I just sat there and looked like I was doing mental math, which I usually was. Then the doors at the back of the chapel opened and the star arrived. Sloan entered the room. The atmosphere shifted immediately. It was as if a spotlight had been turned on. She was wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than my car. It was fitted perfectly tailored to show off her figure while still remaining technically appropriate for a funeral. She had a black clutch tucked under her arm and a handkerchief already in her hand. She did not just walk down the aisle. She glided. She stopped to embrace people she barely knew, offering them a tragic smile that said, "I am broken, but I am strong." She hugged a second cousin for a full 5 seconds, patting his back with a rhythmic comfort. I watched her performance with a cold fascination. It was flawless. If I did not know her, I would have believed it. I would have believed that she was the devastated granddaughter who had lost her best friend. I would have believed the moisture in her eyes was genuine sorrow and not a biological reaction she could summon on command. She made her way to the front and hugged our mother. It was a tableau of grief. 2 beautiful women clinging to each other in a storm. A photographer from the local community paper who had been invited by Diane snapped a picture. I knew it would end up on Facebook within the hour. Then Sloan looked up. She looked over Diane's shoulder and her eyes locked onto mine. For a second the mask slipped. It was a fraction of a second, but I saw it. She did not look at me with sympathy. She did not look at me with shared loss. She looked at me the way a general looks at a flank that might be exposed. She was assessing me. She was checking to see if I was a threat. It was a look of pure calculation. She was doing an inventory of the room, and I was a variable she had not yet solved. Then just as quickly the mask was back in place, she gave me a sad, brave nod and turned back to the coffin to place a single white rose on the polished wood. I felt a need for fresh air, or at least air that did not smell like a greenhouse fire. I stayed by the coffee station nursing a styrofoam cup that I had no intention of drinking. "Excuse me," the voice was low and gravelly. I turned to see a man standing next to me. He had positioned himself carefully, so that his back was to the main room, creating a small private space between us and the wall. He was older, perhaps in his early 70s. He wore a gray suit that was clean, but dated the lapels a little too wide for the current fashion. He held a leather briefcase that looked like it had been carried every day for 40 years. "Are you Lucy?" he asked. "I am," I said. "Do I know you?" "I am Grant Holloway," he said. "I was your grandmother's attorney for a long time, since before you were born." I looked at him. I remembered the name from some old stories Grandma used to tell about the machine shop days. She had mentioned a lawyer who was the only honest man in a city of thieves. "I did not know she still had a lawyer," I said. Grant smiled. It was a small, dry smile. That was the point, Lucy. Eleanor liked to keep her business quiet, especially in the last few years. He glanced over his shoulder at the crowd. He looked at Sloane, who was now holding court near the altar, accepting tissues from a sympathetic neighbor. "She was a remarkable woman," Grant said, turning back to me. "She saw things clearly. She saw people clearly." He reached into his jacket pocket. He did not open the briefcase. He pulled out a plain white envelope. It was not sealed, but it was folded over. "She wanted you to have this," he said. "She was very specific about the timing. She said to give it to you when the family was all together but distracted." He pressed the envelope into my hand. "What is it?" I asked, looking down at it. "It is a copy of her insurance policy," Grant said, "the original, and a few other things she wanted you to see." I started to open the flap. Grant put a hand on my arm to stop me. "Listen to me, Lucy. Papers do not lie. People do. What you have in your hand is the truth. What you see out there," he gestured toward Sloane and Diane, "is a narrative. Do not confuse the two." I nodded. I understood that distinction better than anyone. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway," I said. "I will be in touch," he said. "Read it carefully." He turned and walked away, slipping out the side door before anyone else noticed he was there. I looked down at the envelope. I felt a strange vibration in my fingers, as if the paper itself was charged with energy. I lifted the flap. I saw the top of a document. It was blue and cream with the logo of Prairie Crest Life and Mutual. "Lucy." The voice was sharp. It cut through the hum of the room like a knife. I looked up. Sloane was standing right in front of me. She had moved with a speed that defied the laws of physics. One moment she was at the front of the chapel, and the next she was looming over me. Her eyes were not sad anymore. They were wide and alert. She was staring at the envelope in my hand. "Who was that?" she asked. Her voice was tight. "Just an old friend of Grandma's," I said. "What did he give you?" Sloane asked. She did not wait for an answer. Her hand shot out. It was a reflex action. It was the instinct of a predator that sees movement in the grass. She snatched the envelope from my hand before I could even tighten my grip. "Hey," I said. "That is mine." Sloane ignored me. She ripped the contents out of the envelope. She unfolded the insurance policy. Her eyes scanned the page frantically. She looked at the header. She looked at the policy number. She looked at the date. I saw her shoulders relax. A look of relief washed over her face, followed immediately by a look of scorn. "Oh my God," she said, letting out a short, harsh laugh. "This is ancient." She held the paper up so I could see it. "Look at this, Lucy. This is that old policy from the 80s, the one she let lapse years ago. I saw this in her filing cabinet. It is worthless." "It is not worthless," I said. "He said it was the original." Sloane rolled her eyes. She shook her head, looking at me with a pitying expression that made my blood boil. "Grandma was a hoarder, Lucy. She kept receipts from 1974. She kept expired coupons. This is just trash. She probably gave it to that old man years ago to hold on to because she thought it was treasure. She was losing her mind at the end, remember?" Sloane did not hand the paper back to me. She crumpled it. She crushed the document in her manicured hand, turning the crisp paper into a ball of blue and cream wreckage. There was a large trash can next to the coffee station. It was one of those open-topped metal bins. Sloane tossed the ball of paper into the can. It hit the bottom with a soft thud. "There," she said, dusting her hands off, as if she had just touched something filthy. "Now we do not have to worry about sorting it later." "Give that back," I said. Stepping forward, "I want to read it." Sloane stepped in front of the trash can, blocking my path. She put a hand on my shoulder. "Lucy, stop. Do not be morbid. It is just old paperwork. We are here to celebrate her life, not dig through her garbage. Diane appeared at our side. She had sensed the tension the way a bat senses sound waves. Girls, she hissed. Keep your voices down. People are looking. Sloane threw her arms around Diane. Mom Lucy is getting upset about some old papers a stranger gave her. I told her to just let it go. We need to focus on the service. Diane looked at me with that familiar mix of exhaustion and disappointment. Lucy, please. Not today. Do not cause a scene. Your sister is right. If it was important, the lawyer would have called us for a meeting. Just let it go. I looked at Diane. I looked at Sloane. Sloane was watching me closely. Her face was composed, but her eyes were hard. She was daring me to reach into that trash can. She was daring me to be the crazy sister who digs through garbage at a funeral. She knew I hated scenes. She knew I hated being the center of attention. I took a breath. I looked at the trash can. I could see the crumpled ball of paper sitting on top of a pile of used napkins and empty coffee cups. Okay, I said. You are right. Sloane smiled. It was the smile of a winner. Good, she said. Come on. The service is starting. You should sit down. She took Diane's arm and led her back toward the front row. She walked with her head high, her hips swaying slightly. She looked like a woman who had just averted a disaster. But she had made a mistake. Sloane thought I gave up because I was weak. She thought I gave up because I was afraid of her. She was wrong. I gave up because I saw something she did not. When Sloane looked at that document, she scanned it for a date and a value. But I saw how she crumpled it. She did not just toss it. She crushed it. She squeezed it until the fibers broke. That is not how you treat trash. That is how you treat evidence. And she was too fast. If it was truly a lapsed policy worth nothing, she would have handed it back to me and laughed. She would have let me read it so I could see for myself that I was wrong. Sloane loves proving me wrong, but she did not let me read it. She destroyed it. I watched them sit down in the front row. The organ music swelled, signaling the start of the eulogy. I sat down in my assigned seat in the second row. I folded my hands in my lap. I did not listen to the eulogy. I did not sing the hymns. I spent the next hour staring at the trash can by the coffee station. I memorized its location. I calculated the cleaning schedule of the facility. I watched every person who walked past it, terrified that someone might drop a half-full latte into the bin and ruin the ink. Sloane thought the paper was gone. She thought the problem was solved. But she forgot who she was dealing with. She forgot that I am an auditor, and an auditor never finalizes the report until they have physically inspected the source documents. I would wait. I would let them cry. I would let them leave. And then I was going to go into that trash. Sleep was a theoretical concept that night. I lay in my bed in Maplewood, staring at the popcorn texture of the ceiling while the digital clock on my nightstand ticked away the minutes of my insomnia. 1:30, 2:15, 3:40. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same 3-second video clip playing on a loop. I saw Sloane's manicured hand snapping forward. I heard the distinct crunch of high-quality paper being destroyed. I saw the arc of the blue and cream document as it fell into the trash can. But it was the sound that bothered me the most. It was the silence that followed. Why had she been so fast? Sloane is a person who savors her victories. If that policy had truly been a worthless, lapsed piece of paper, she would have opened it. She would have read it out loud to the entire room, mocking Grandma's senility with every line. She would have handed it to me and said, "Here you go, Lucy. Add it to your collection of useless facts." But she did not do that. She destroyed it before I could read a single word. And then there was what Grant Holloway had said. Papers do not lie. By 4 a.m, the questions were physically painful. They felt like a tightened screw in the center of my forehead. I kicked off the sheets. I knew I was not going to sleep. I also knew that the janitorial staff at Kirkwood Memorial Chapel probably started their shift at 6 a.m. If they emptied the lobby bins into the main dumpster, the paper would be gone forever. I put on a pair of dark jeans and a hoodie. I grabbed a flashlight from the utility drawer in my kitchen. I walked out to my car. The air was cold and damp, and the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement in long, distorted streaks. It felt less like a suburb and more like the opening scene of a low-budget noir film. The drive to Kirkwood took 15 minutes. The roads were empty. I parked my Ford Focus a block away from the funeral home because I did not want to be seen by a passing patrol car. I walked the rest of the way, keeping to the shadows. The funeral home looked different at night. During the day, it was a manicured estate meant to project peace and dignity. Under the harsh yellow security lights of the parking lot, it looked sterile and industrial. I walked around to the back of the building. There it was, the dumpster. It was a large green metal container sitting behind a brick enclosure. I stood in front of it and let out a long breath that turned into white mist in the cold air. I am 34 years old, I whispered to myself. I am a senior analyst at a freight auditing firm. I have a 401k and a credit score of 780, and I am about to climb into a dumpster to look for garbage. If my mother could see me now, she would finally have a genuine reason to be disappointed instead of just her usual recreational disappointment. I opened the heavy plastic lid. The smell hit me immediately. It was a sickening combination of wilted flowers, wet cardboard, and the vague sweetness of decaying food. I shined my flashlight into the abyss. It was mostly black bags. The chapel must have done a cleanup after the viewing ended. I had to think like an auditor. I had to reconstruct the workflow. The bin I was looking for was in the lobby near the coffee station. That meant it would contain coffee cups, napkins, and catering debris. I spotted a bag near the top that had a tear in the side. I could see the edge of a styrofoam cup poking out. I reached in. I am not proud of this moment. I had to hike myself up on the rim of the dumpster, balancing on the metal edge while I grabbed the neck of the plastic bag. I pulled it toward me. It was heavy. I dragged it out and dropped it onto the asphalt. I crouched down and tore the bag open. The smell of stale coffee was overwhelming. I sifted through the mess: napkins, a half-eaten ham sandwich, a program from the service with my grandmother's face smiling out from under a layer of mustard. And then I saw it. It was a ball of paper crinkled and stained brown on one side. I picked it up. My hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. I carefully uncrumpled it. The paper was damp and it smelled terrible, but the ink was waterproof. Prairie Crest Life and Mutual, whole life insurance policy. Policy number 8492210X, insured. Eleanor Marie Johnson. It was here. It was real. I did not wait to read the rest. I shoved the damp paper into the pocket of my hoodie. I gathered the rest of the trash and shoved it back into the bag, then threw the bag back into the dumpster. I closed the lid. I wanted to leave no trace that I'd been there. I walked back to my car, quickly checking over my shoulder every few seconds. I felt like I had just robbed a bank, but all I had stolen was my own inheritance. When I got back to my apartment in Maplewood, I went straight to the kitchen. I laid the document out on the counter. I got a roll of paper towels and carefully dabbed away the coffee stains and the moisture. The paper was resilient. It was high-quality bond stock, the kind they do not use anymore. I made a pot of coffee. I sat down. I put on my reading glasses. I engaged the part of my brain that I used every day at Redwood Lane. The emotional part of me, the granddaughter who missed her grandma, was turned off. The auditor was turned on. I began to read. Sloan had lied. That was the first and most obvious finding. She had called it a lapsed policy. She had called it worthless. The premium schedule on page 3 showed a continuous payment history dating back 40 years. Every month, like clockwork, a payment had been made. The policy was fully paid up. It was not lapsed. It was arguably the most healthy financial instrument I had ever seen. I turned the page. Attached to the back of the main policy was a document I had not expected to see. It looked like a photocopy that had been stapled to the original. It was a change of beneficiary request form. I looked at the date on the form. It was dated August 14th, 2022. I looked at the name in the new beneficiary field. Sloan Johnson. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sloan had tried to change the beneficiary 3 years ago, but that was not the most interesting part. The most interesting part was the red ink stamped across the face of the document. Rejected/signature mismatch. I leaned closer. I adjusted the overhead light. I looked at the signature block. The signature read, Eleanor M. Johnson, but the slant was wrong. The loops on the J were too wide. My grandmother's handwriting was spidery and sharp. This handwriting was rounder. It looked like someone trying to draw the signature rather than write it. Sloan had forged Grandma's signature. She had tried to steal this policy while Grandma was still alive and she had failed. That explained why she threw it away. She did not throw it away because it was worthless. She threw it away because it was evidence of a crime she had attempted to commit. She saw the rejected form stapled to the back and she panicked. She needed it gone before I saw it. I kept reading. I scrutinized every inch of the paper. That is my specialty. I look for the things that do not belong. On the bottom corner of the last page, the page detailing the payout options, there was something else. It was faint, written in blue ballpoint pen. It was so small that if you were scanning the document quickly, you would mistake it for a smudge or a printing error. But I knew that handwriting. That was Grandma's real handwriting. It was a string of characters. 11-04-Gateway-992. I stared at it. It looked like a code. 1104. November 4th. That was not a birthday. It was not an anniversary. Gateway. Gateway what? Gateway Arch? Gateway Computer? Gateway Bank? There was a Gateway Federal Credit Union in Kirkwood. Grandma had banked there for 50 years, and 992. A box number. A safety deposit box. My grandmother had left a breadcrumb trail. She knew someone would try to bury this policy, so she wrote the location of the backup on the policy itself, knowing that the only person who would read the fine print was me. I sat back in my chair. The sun was starting to come up outside. The gray light of dawn was filtering through my kitchen blinds. My phone buzzed on the table. The sudden noise made me jump. I looked at the screen. New message from Sloan. I checked the time. 6:14 in the morning. Sloan does not wake up before 8. Sloan believes that beauty sleep is a non-negotiable medical necessity. I opened the message. Hey sis, just thinking about you. Hope you're okay after yesterday. I know I was a little intense about the papers, but I just wanted to protect you from getting your hopes up. Mom is worried too. Let's do brunch later. My treat. I stared at the words. Protect you. My treat. She was terrified. She had probably woken up in a cold sweat, realizing that she had left the paper in a public trash can. She was testing the waters. She wanted to see if I was suspicious. She wanted to pull me close where she could watch me. If I was the old Lucy, I would have replied instantly. I would have said, "Thanks, Sloan, I am fine. Let's do brunch." I would have smoothed things over, but I was not that Lucy anymore. I was the Lucy who had just climbed out of a dumpster with a $2.3 million secret in her pocket. I did not reply. I stood up. I went to my closet. I did not put on my usual comfortable cardigan. I put on my best charcoal gray blazer. I put on the black trousers that I usually saved for client meetings. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, but there was something else in my face too. A hardness, a clarity. I picked up the coffee-stained document. I found a clean, crisp manila folder and placed the policy inside. I walked out to my car. I was not going to Redwood Lane freight audits today. I was not going to look for missing fuel surcharges. I drove toward Clayton, toward the glass and steel tower where Prairie Crest Life and Mutual had their regional headquarters. Sloan thought the game was over because she had thrown the board in the trash. She did not realize that the game had not even started. I pulled into the visitor parking lot of the insurance building. It was 7:55 in the morning. They opened at 8. I sat in my car and watched the front doors. I saw employees walking in holding their travel mugs, looking bored and sleepy. They had no idea what was about to walk into their lobby. I touched the folder on the passenger seat. Grandma had told me to trust what I could prove. I looked at the building. I am going to prove it all, I said out loud. I opened the car door and stepped out. The morning air was cold, but I did not feel it. I walked toward the revolving doors, ready to pull the trigger on the trap my grandmother had set. The lobby of Prairie Crest Life and Mutual smelled of lemon polish and quiet money. It was a stark contrast to the dumpster behind the Kirkwood Memorial Chapel where I had spent my morning. I stood at the reception desk, clutching the manila folder to my chest. I was wearing my best blazer, but I knew I still looked like a woman who had not slept. My hair was pulled back too tight and my eyes felt like they were filled with sand. The receptionist was a young woman with perfect skin and a headset that looked like it cost more than my first car. She smiled at me with professional warmth. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to inquire about a policy," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "My grandmother passed away recently. I found this document." I slid the folder across the marble counter. I did not take the policy out. I did not want to touch it more than necessary. The receptionist opened the folder. Her nose wrinkled slightly as the smell of stale coffee and damp paper wafted up. She looked at the stained document, then she looked at me. Her smile faltered just a fraction. "I will need the policy number," she said. "It is at the top," I said. 849-221-00X. She typed the numbers into her computer. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys. Click, click, click. Then she hit enter. Her hand stopped. I watched her face closely. I am an auditor. I know what it looks like when someone finds a discrepancy. Her eyes widened. She leaned closer to the screen. She typed something else rapidly as if she thought she had made a mistake. She hit enter again. The professional warmth vanished. Her posture stiffened. She did not look at me. She picked up her desk phone and dialed a 3-digit extension. "Ms. Caldwell," she said. Her voice was low but urgent. "I have a walk-in at the front desk. Policy 849. Yes. The Johnson file. Yes, she is here." She hung up. She looked at me now, but the friendliness was gone. It was replaced by a wary, guarded expression. "Please take a seat over there," she said, gesturing to a leather waiting area. "Ms. Caldwell will be with you shortly." I did not argue. I walked over to the leather chair and sat down. I checked the time on my phone. It was 8:15 in the morning. 2 minutes later, a heavy door buzzed open. A woman walked out. She was in her 50s wearing a navy blue suit that looked like armor. She had short gray hair and glasses on a chain. She held a tablet in her hand. She scanned the lobby, saw me, and walked straight toward me. "Ms. Johnson?" she asked. "Yes," I said, standing up. "I am Renee Caldwell, Senior Claims Specialist. Please come with me." She did not offer to shake my hand. She turned and walked back toward the secure door. I followed her. We walked down a long hallway lined with closed doors. It was silent back here, the kind of silence where careers are made or destroyed. She led me into a small conference room. It had a round table and no windows. "Sit down," she said. I sat. I placed the folder on the table. Renee sat across from me. She reached for the folder. She opened it and looked at the coffee-stained document. She did not wince at the smell. She examined it with the clinical detachment of a coroner. She ran her finger over the raised seal on the bottom. She checked the page numbers. "This document has been through quite an ordeal," she said. "My sister threw it in a dumpster," I said. "I decided to stick to the facts. I retrieved it at 4 this morning." Renee looked up at me over her glasses. For the first time, I saw a flicker of interest in her eyes. "You went dumpster diving for this?" she asked. "I knew it was important," I said. Renee nodded. She tapped her tablet. "You were right. It is important." She turned the tablet around so I could see the screen. "I need to verify your identity before we proceed," she said. "Driver's license and social security number, please." I handed her my license. I recited my social security number. She typed them in. A green checkmark appeared on the screen. "Okay," Renee said. She took a breath. "Ms. Johnson, I can confirm that this policy is active. It is a whole-life policy purchased in 1984. It has been fully paid up for 10 years. I gripped the edge of the table. "What is the value?" I asked. Renee scrolled down. "The base face value was $500,000, she said. "But your grandmother opted for the dividend reinvestment plan. She never took a penny out. She let the interest compound for 40 years. She pointed to a figure at the bottom of the screen. As of this morning, the total death benefit payable to the beneficiary is $2,342,118.56. The room seemed to tilt. $2.3 million, I whispered. I felt a wave of nausea. I thought about Grandma's house with the peeling paint. I thought about her cutting coupons for tuna cans. I thought about the way she would wash aluminum foil to use it again. She never spent it, I said. She had all that money and she lived like she was poor. Renee softened her tone slightly. She was not living like she was poor Ms. Johnson. She was saving. Some people save for a rainy day. Your grandmother was saving for a hurricane. Renee tapped the screen again. The display changed. It showed a timeline. It looked like a staircase going down. And the hurricane arrived about 4 years ago, Renee said. She pushed a button on the table and a larger monitor on the wall flickered to life. It mirrored her tablet screen. This is the activity log for the policy, she said. For 36 years, this file was dormant. Just automatic dividend reinvestments. Then in 2021, the activity exploded. She pointed to the first entry. September 14th, 2021. A request was received to change the mailing address to a P.O. box in Clayton. We rejected it because the signature did not match. She pointed to the next entry. November 2nd, 2021. A request to update the power of attorney. The document claimed that Eleanor Johnson was incapacitated and granted authority to Sloan Johnson. We called your grandmother. She answered the phone and told us she was currently doing a crossword puzzle and was certainly not incapacitated. We rejected the request. I watched the screen. The entries kept coming. March 2022. Beneficiary change request. Rejected. July 2022. Beneficiary change request. Rejected. December 2022. This one was aggressive. We received a fax from a law office claiming to represent Eleanor Johnson demanding the liquidation of the policy. Renee looked at me. There were 9 attempts in total. 9 times someone tried to divert these funds or take control of the policy. I looked at the names on the rejected forms. They were all variations of the same thing. Sloan Johnson, Sloan E. Johnson, Sloan Vaughn. They were persistent, I said. They were criminal, Renee corrected. And they were getting better at it. She pulled up a specific document from 6 months ago. Look at this one. This is a change of beneficiary form. The signature is almost perfect. It is a very high-quality forgery. And look here. She pointed to a stamp at the bottom of the page. It has a notary seal. It says that a notary public witnessed Eleanor Johnson sign this document in person. I leaned in. I read the name on the stamp. Miles Denton, Notary Public. Commission expires 2026. We investigated this, Renee said. We sent a field agent to interview Mr. Denton. He works at a shipping and printing franchise in a strip mall in Brentwood. When we showed him the document, he got very nervous. He claimed he did not remember the specific signing, but that he never notarizes without ID. But Grandma was in the hospital that week, I said. She had pneumonia. She could not have gone to a strip mall in Brentwood. Exactly, Renee said. That is why we flagged it. We knew it was a lie, but we could not prove he was lying. We just rejected the form based on the signature mismatch again. But it was close. If your grandmother had not been so diligent about checking in with us, they might have slipped one past us. The door to the conference room opened. I turned around. 2 people walked in. I recognized Graham Whitaker immediately from the company website. He was the branch director. He looked tired. He had the face of a man who had been expecting a disaster and was relieved that it had finally arrived. Next to him was a woman with sharp features and hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She carried a leather portfolio. Ms. Johnson Whitaker said, I am Graham Whitaker. This is Lydia Crowley, our general counsel. I stood up to shake their hands, but Whitaker waved me down. Please sit, he said. We have a lot to get through. They sat at the table. Lydia placed her portfolio in front of her. She looked at the coffee-stained policy, and then at me. You found the failsafe, she said. The failsafe I asked. Whitaker nodded. Ms. Johnson, we have been waiting for you to walk through that door. In fact, we were instructed to wait for you. He looked at Renee. Show her the lock protocol. Renee typed a command into her tablet. The screen on the wall changed. It showed a large red banner across the top of the file. Legal lock. Do not process. In-person verification only. Beneficiary. Lucy Johnson. Your grandmother came to see us, Whitaker said. It was about 11 months ago. She was very frail. She had to use a walker, but her mind was clear. She sat in this room, Lydia added. She told us that her granddaughter Sloane was trying to steal her life's work. Why didn't she call the police, I asked. We asked her that. Whitaker said, "We wanted to call the police then. We had enough evidence for attempted fraud. We wanted to close the account and transfer the funds to a court-appointed trust just to stop the harassment. My team was spending hours every week rejecting these fake forms. We wanted to end it." He paused. He looked at his hands. "But she stopped us." "She stopped you," I repeated. "She told us that if we closed the file, Sloane would just find another way," Lydia said. "She said Sloane would manipulate the estate or finding a way to get power of attorney through the medical system. Eleanor said the only way to stop Sloane was to let her think she was winning." Whitaker leaned forward. "She ordered us to keep the policy active. She ordered us to keep rejecting the forms, but to archive every single one of them. She told us to build a library of her sister's crimes." I felt a chill go down my spine. Grandma had used herself as bait. "She said one more thing," Lydia said. "She said, when I die, Sloane will think she has won because she will destroy the paper. She will think the paper is the money. She does not know the money is in the system." Lydia looked at me with intensity. She said, "You wait for Lucy. Lucy reads the fine print. Lucy will come." I felt tears pricking my eyes. I wiped them away quickly. I was not going to cry in front of the legal team. "So what happens now?" I asked. "The policy is valid. I am the beneficiary. Do you cut me a check?" Whitaker looked at Lydia. Lydia looked at the file. "Under normal circumstances, yes," Whitaker said. "We would process the claim, and you would have the funds in 10 days. But I sensed a but coming." "But these are not normal circumstances," Lydia said. "This is an active crime scene." Whitaker reached for the phone on the conference table. It was a black Polycom conference phone. "When you walked in, I told reception to trigger a code red," he said. "That does not mean I am calling the police, Ms. Johnson. The local police handle theft. They handle burglary." He punched a button on the phone. The line began to ring. It was a speakerphone call. "This is something different," Whitaker said. "The involvement of a notary, the sophistication of the documents, the persistence over 4 years. This is not just a greedy sister. This is a network." The phone rang twice. Then it picked up. Voice on the phone, Missouri Department of Insurance. Financial Crimes Investigation Unit. Detective Keene speaking. Whitaker looked at me. His eyes were grim. "Whitaker." "Detective Keene, this is Graham Whitaker at Prairie Crest. We have the Johnson beneficiary in the building, and we have the physical evidence." Voice on the phone. "Do you have the original policy?" Whitaker. "Yes. And we have the timeline of the 9 fraudulent attempts, including the Denton notarization." Voice on the phone. "Okay, lock the doors. Do not let her leave. I am 20 minutes out. We are going to open a RICO case." Whitaker hung up the phone. He looked at me. "You are not just getting an inheritance, Ms. Johnson," he said. "You are about to become the primary witness in a state investigation. Your grandmother did not just leave you money. She left you a loaded gun pointed at the people who tried to rob her." I looked at the screen on the wall. I looked at the list of rejected forms. I saw Sloane's name over and over again. I thought about the brunch invitation I had received this morning. "My treat," she had said. I looked at Whitaker. "I am ready," I said. And for the first time in my life, I absolutely meant it. I was not just the quiet sister anymore. I was the one holding the evidence. And I was about to bring the whole house of cards crashing down. I left the sterile glass tower of Prairie Crest Life and Mutual and drove 20 minutes south to a part of town that time seemed to have forgotten. The law office of Grant Holloway was located in a brick building in Soulard that had probably been standing since the World's Fair. There was no security guard at the front and no receptionist with a headset. There was just a heavy wooden door with frosted glass and the name Holloway and Associates painted in gold letters that were starting to flake at the edges. When I opened the door, the smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of old paper and dust and leather bindings. It was the smell of a place where secrets came to hibernate. It was comforting in a way that the cold air of the insurance office had not been. This was where my grandmother felt safe. I could feel her presence in the stacks of manila folders that lined every available surface. Grant was waiting for me. He sat behind a desk that was large enough to land a small aircraft on. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked like a man who had checked his watch and found the world running exactly on schedule. "You found it," he said. It was not a question. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. The springs creaked loudly in the quiet room. "I found it," I said, "and I went to the insurance company. They told me everything." Grant nodded slowly. He reached down and pulled a thick binder from a drawer. It hit the desk with a heavy thud. It was at least 3 inches thick. "The insurance policy was just the bait, Lucy," he said. "This is the trap." He opened the binder. The pages were crisp and organized with colorful tabs. "Your grandmother was a bookkeeper," Grant said. "She understood ledgers. She understood that in life there are credits and there are debits. And she knew that for the last 4 years, your sister and your mother were running up a significant debt." He turned the binder toward me. "This is the estate plan," he said. "It is not just a simple will. A will goes through probate. A will is public record. A will can be contested by angry relatives who feel they deserve a piece of the pie. Eleanor did not want a will. She wanted a fortress." He tapped the first page. "This is the Eleanor Marie Johnson Revocable Living Trust. It was established 5 years ago and updated significantly 11 months ago." I looked at the legal language. It was dense and impenetrable to the untrained eye, but Grant guided me through it. "Everything she owned is in this trust," he explained. "The house in Kirkwood, the car, the savings accounts, the insurance payouts, everything. And as of the moment of her death, you became the sole successor trustee and the sole beneficiary." He flipped to a section marked with a red tab. "This is the most important part," he said. "Read this paragraph." I leaned in. The text was standard, Times New Roman, but the words were brutal in their clarity. "I have intentionally omitted my daughter Diane Johnson and my granddaughter Sloane Johnson from this trust. This is not an oversight. This is a deliberate decision based on their conduct during my lifetime. I leave them nothing. Any attempt by either party to contest this trust shall be considered a violation of my final wishes and will result in the immediate forfeiture of any personal items I may have otherwise allowed them to keep." It was cold. It was precise. It was Grandma. "She wanted to make sure they could not sue you," Grant said. "If we had just left them $1 or ignored them, they could claim you manipulated her. But this calls them out. It acknowledges their existence and rejects it." He sat back in his chair and tented his fingers. "But there is something else you need to know, Lucy. Something the insurance company probably hinted at but could not show you." He opened a separate file folder. Inside was a photocopy of a document that made my stomach turn. It was a power of attorney form. "I saw this on the screen at the insurance office," I said. "They tried to submit this in 2021. Grant shook his head. "You saw the rejection log," he said. "You did not see the document itself. Look closer." I looked at the paper. It granted Sloane full control over Eleanor's medical and financial decisions. It gave her the right to sell property, access bank accounts, and liquidate assets. But look at the witness lines, Grant said, pointing to the bottom of the page. There were 2 signatures witnessing the document. One was illegible, the other was clear. "Diane Johnson. My mother." I felt the air leave the room. "My mother signed this," I whispered. "She witnessed it," Grant said. "She signed a legal document stating that her mother was mentally incompetent and that her daughter should have total control. They tried to bypass the bank. They tried to bypass the insurance checks. They wanted to declare Eleanor unfit, so they could legally drain her accounts while she was still sitting in her living room doing crossword puzzles. This is not just greed, I said. This is evil. They were trying to erase her. They were trying to turn her into a non-person. Grant nodded grimly. That was the day your grandmother came to me. She was shaking, not from age, but from rage. She sat right where you are sitting, and she told me she wanted to go to the police. She wanted to file a restraining order. Why didn't she? I asked. Why did she let them keep coming to Sunday dinner? Why did she let Sloane pretend to be the loving granddaughter? Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. It was a long silver key with a number stamped on the head. 992. Because she knew who she was dealing with, Grant said. If she had confronted them, they would have gaslighted her. They would have told everyone she was paranoid. They would have told the family she was losing her mind. Sloane is charming. Diane is a professional victim. They would have spun a story that Eleanor was the confused old woman, and they were the caring family trying to help. He placed the key on top of the binder. Eleanor knew that in a battle of words she might lose. Sloane is louder. Diane is more manipulative. So Eleanor decided not to fight a battle of words. She decided to fight a battle of paper. I picked up the key. It was heavy and cold. "This is for a safety deposit box at Gateway Federal," I said, remembering the code on the insurance policy. Grant nodded. "She spent the last year of her life filling that box," he said. "She did not put diamonds in there. She did not put gold. She put evidence. Every time Sloane tried to trick her into signing something, Eleanor kept a copy. Every time Diane called her trying to guilt her into writing a check, Eleanor wrote down the conversation." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "She told me that she did not want revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. She wanted justice, and justice requires proof. She wanted a courtroom, Lucy. She wanted a venue where Sloane could not smile her way out of trouble. She wanted a place where the documents would speak for themselves." I looked at the binder. I looked at the power of attorney with my mother's signature. I realized then that my grandmother had spent her final days living in a war zone. She had sat at her kitchen table drinking tea with the people who were plotting to strip her of her dignity. She had smiled and nodded while they circled her like sharks, and all the while she was quietly, meticulously documenting every bite they took. She was so lonely, I said, my voice breaking. "She did this all alone." "She was not alone," Grant said gently. "She had you." I looked up. "She told me that you were the only one who never asked for anything," he said. "You were the only one who asked her how her day was, and actually listened to the answer. She did this for you. She wanted to make sure that when the dust settled, you would be the one standing." He pushed the binder toward me. "This is yours now. The trust, the evidence, the responsibility. You are the trustee. That means you are the general of this army now." I ran my hand over the cover of the binder. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. It was the same calm I felt when I balanced a complex spreadsheet. The numbers were aligning. The chaotic data of my family was finally being sorted into the correct columns. My phone rang in my pocket. It was a number I did not recognize. I looked at Grant. He nodded. "Answer it," he said. "It has begun." I picked up the phone. "This is Lucy Johnson," I said. "Ms. Johnson. This is Special Agent Miller with the Missouri Department of Insurance Financial Crimes Unit." I sat up straighter. "Yes, Agent Miller, I am listening." "We just got off the phone with Graham Whitaker at Prairie Crest," the agent said. His voice was brisk and professional. "We have reviewed the preliminary file regarding the insurance fraud attempts." "Okay," I said. "Ms. Johnson, I need you to come in," he said. "But I need to tell you something first. We have not just been waiting for this call. We have been waiting for a reason to move on Sloane Johnson for 6 months." My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Your sister's name has flagged in our system before," the agent said. "We have 3 other files on her. Different victims, different amounts. But the pattern is the same. We never had enough to stick a felony charge because the victims were either too confused to testify or the paperwork was too muddy." He paused. "But this file is different. This file is clean, and the amount puts it into a Class A felony bracket." I looked at Grant. He was watching me with a small, sad smile. "We need that safety deposit box, Ms. Johnson," the agent said. "If what Mr. Whitaker says is true, and your grandmother kept her own records, we might finally have the nail in the coffin. Can you meet us at Gateway Federal in an hour?" I looked at the silver key in my hand. "The key to the truth. I will be there," I said. I hung up the phone. I stood up. I picked up the heavy binder. I picked up the key. Grant stood up too. He walked around the desk and offered me his hand. "She would be proud of you," he said. I shook his hand. "She hasn't won yet," I said. Grant smiled. "Oh, I think she has," he said. "She just needed someone to read the verdict." I walked out of the office into the bright sunlight of the St. Louis morning. The world looked the same as it had an hour ago, but everything was different. My mother was not just a passive enabler. She was a co-conspirator. My sister was not just a failed entrepreneur. She was a serial predator. And I was not just Lucy the auditor, I was the executioner. I got into my Ford Focus. I placed the estate plan on the passenger seat next to the insurance policy. I put the key in the cup holder. I started the engine. The muffler rattled as I pulled away from the curb, but I didn't mind. It was the sound of my life moving forward. It was the sound of the machine finally working the way it was supposed to. I drove toward Gateway Federal. The agent said they had been watching Sloan for 6 months. That meant there were others, other grandmothers, other families. Sloan thought she was hunting easy prey. She thought the world was full of victims waiting to be plucked. She was about to find out that she had walked into a trap set by the best bookkeeper in St. Louis, and I was going to make sure every single penny was accounted for. The bank vault at Gateway Federal was quiet in a way that libraries aspire to be. It was a silence that felt heavy and expensive. The air was cool and smelled of steel and circulated dust. The bank manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, had led me back there with a solemn reverence after I presented the key and my identification. He left me alone in a small private viewing room with a door that clicked shut, like the closing of a coffin. On the table in front of me sat Box 992. It was a long metal box, painted a dull gray. It did not look like it held the secrets of a family. It did not look like it held the justification for a felony investigation. It looked like something you would keep spare change in. I sat down and took a breath. My hands were trembling slightly. I was not afraid of what I would find. I was afraid of how it would change me. I was already feeling the shift. The Lucy Johnson who audited freight bills was fading away, and a colder, harder version was taking her place. I inserted the key. It turned with a smooth mechanical slide. I lifted the lid. There was no gold. There were no stacks of cash bound in rubber bands. There were no diamonds wrapped in velvet. It was paper. It was stacks of paper organized with multicolored tabs and binder clips. It was the work of a bookkeeper who had spent 40 years bringing order to chaos. Even in death, Eleanor Johnson was organized. Right on top was a white envelope. On the front in bold black marker were the words, "For Lucy. Read first." I picked it up. The paper felt crisp. I opened it and unfolded the letter inside. It was handwritten. My grandmother's handwriting was distinctive, sharp, and angular like the woman herself. "My dearest Lucy, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you were smart enough to find the breadcrumbs. I knew you would be. You were always the one who paid attention. By now your mother and your sister have probably told you that I lost my mind. They have probably told you that I spent my savings, or that I forgot to pay the premiums. They will tell you that I left nothing behind but a house full of junk. Do not believe them. I am of sound mind and body as I write this. I am not confused. I am simply tired. I am tired of watching the people who are supposed to love me look at me like I am a bank account with a pulse. I have not left you a fortune in gold, Lucy. I have left you the truth. And in this family, the truth is the most expensive thing we own. You need to understand something. Sloan did not become this way by accident. She was grown in a garden that was watered with lies. Look at the file marked Family History. You think you know our tree, but you only know the branches they let you see. You do not know about the roots. Read the files, listen to the tapes, and then do what you have to do. Do not let them bully you. You have the receipts. Love, Grandma. I put the letter down. My throat felt tight. The garden watered with lies. It was such a poetic way to describe the toxic ecosystem I had grown up in. I reached into the box and pulled out the file marked Family History. It was thin. Inside there were several old black and white photographs and a few yellowed newspaper clippings. I looked at the first photograph. It showed 2 young women standing on the porch of a house I did not recognize. One of them was clearly my grandmother, Eleanor. She looked young, perhaps 20. She was smiling a rare, genuine smile. Next to her was another woman. She looked strikingly like my mother, Diane. The resemblance was unsettling. The same curve of the jaw, the same wide-set eyes. But this woman had a hardness in her face that Diane masked with fake politeness. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in pencil, was Eleanor and Clara, 1955. Clara. I had never heard the name Clara. I knew my grandmother had a brother who died in the war, but I had never heard of a sister named Clara. I picked up the newspaper clippings. They were from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch dated 1962. Local woman charged in check kiting scheme. I read the article. It detailed the arrest of Clara Vance, formerly Clara Johnson, for a series of frauds involving fake payroll checks at a textile factory. She had embezzled what would be the equivalent of $100,000 today. She had been sentenced to 5 years in prison. There was another clipping from a few years later. Parole violation leads to rearrest. I looked at the photo again. This was the secret. My grandmother had a sister who was a criminal. A sister who stole. A sister who was erased from the family narrative because she was an embarrassment. My mother, Diane, would have been a child when this happened. She grew up watching her aunt be scrubbed from existence. She learned the lesson early. If someone makes you look bad, you delete them. You pretend they never existed. You prioritize the appearance of propriety over the reality of the mess. And Sloane was the reincarnation of Clara. The greed, the charm, the willingness to cross the line. It was in the blood, or at least it was in the air they breathed. I put the family history file aside. I reached for the thickest file in the box. It was labeled The Evidence. This was the meat of it. This was what Graham Whitaker at the insurance company had been talking about. Inside were photocopies of every single document Sloane had tried to push past my grandmother. There were powers of attorney. There were quitclaim deeds for the house. There were change of beneficiary forms. But what caught my attention was a small index card taped to the inside cover of the file folder. It had the code I had seen on the edge of the insurance policy, 11-04-Gateway-992. But below it was something else. Login, Eleanor. Truth1984@gmail.com. Password, watch them fall. 2024. My grandmother had created a digital archive. She knew that paper could be burned or shredded. She knew that physical evidence was vulnerable, so she had backed it up to the cloud. I pulled out my smartphone. I had good signal in the viewing room. I opened the browser and went to Gmail. I typed in the credentials. The inbox loaded. There were dozens of emails. Most of them were sent from the account to itself. They were subject-lined by date. May 12, 2022. Sloane visit. June 4, 2022. Diane call. August 15, 2022. The notary incident. I opened the email titled, The Notary Incident. Attached was a PDF scan of the rejected beneficiary form, the one with the fake notary stamp from Miles Denton. But there was also a voice memo attached. I turned the volume down low on my phone and pressed play. The audio was clear. It sounded like it had been recorded on a high-quality device, perhaps a digital recorder sitting on a table. Voice 1, Eleanor. I am telling you, Sloane. I do not understand these papers. Why do I need to sign this again? I already have a will. Voice 2. Sloane. Oh my God. Grandma, we have been over this. The will is old. The laws have changed. This just protects your assets from the government. If you do not sign this, the state will take 40% of your house when you die. Do you want the government to have your money, or do you want family to have it? Voice 1, Eleanor. I want family to have it, but this says you get power of attorney. That means you can sell the house while I'm still living in it. Voice 2. Sloane. I would never do that. That is insulting. I am trying to help you. You know Mom is too stressed to handle this. I am the only one looking out for you. Just sign it. I have a friend who can notarize it later so you do not have to travel. Voice 1. Eleanor, a friend. That is not how it works, Sloane. The notary has to see me sign. Voice 2. Sloane. It is fine. He knows me. He trusts me. Just sign the damn paper, Grandma. You are making this so difficult. The recording ended. I felt a cold rage spreading through my chest. The manipulation, the lying, the state will take 40%. It was a classic scare tactic used on the elderly, and the line about the notary, he knows me, he trusts me, that was proof. That was conspiracy. I went back to the inbox. I scrolled down. There was an email with the subject line, The Man on the Phone. I opened it. The body of the email was short. Sloane came over today. She thought I was asleep in the recliner. She went into the kitchen to make a call. I had the recorder running on the kitchen counter under the mail pile. I clicked the attachment. The audio was a bit muffled at first, then it cleared up. I could hear the background hum of my grandmother's old refrigerator. Sloane's voice. No, she is still kicking. I know. I know we are on a timeline. Look, Miles, I need you to backdate the stamp. Male voice on phone speaker. I cannot backdate it 6 months, Sloane. That is too risky. If they audit my book, I am toasted. Sloane. They are not going to audit you. It is a $2,000 job. Miles. Easy money. Just say she came in last week. She's practically a vegetable. She is not going to remember. Male voice, 2000. You said 3. Sloane, fine. 3? But I need the stamp today. I have to get this to Prairie Crest before the end of the quarter. Male voice. All right. Bring it by the shop after 5. Make sure you use the back door. The recording ended. I sat there in the silent room staring at my phone. Miles Denton, the notary, and Sloane. She's practically a vegetable. My grandmother heard that. She listened to her own granddaughter call her a vegetable while she was sitting in the next room feigning sleep. She listened to her granddaughter barter over the price of her integrity. $3,000 to steal $2.3 million. This was not just a desperate woman trying to get an inheritance. This was a business transaction. Sloane had a partner. She had a system. I looked at the timestamps on the emails. My grandmother had been collecting this for 2 years. She had built a dossier that would put the FBI to shame. She had let them think she was weak. She had let them think she was stupid, and all the while she was tightening the noose. I went back to the box. I dug deeper. There was one more folder at the bottom. It was labeled Redwood Lane. I frowned. Redwood Lane was my company. Why did she have a folder for my job? I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a letter addressed to me, but it was not about feelings. It was about logistics. Lucy, you are an auditor. You look for patterns. I want you to look at the pattern of Sloane's employment. She says she works in marketing. She says she is a consultant. But look at the dates. She worked for Silverbridge Care Advocates for 6 months in 2019. That is a company that helps seniors manage their finances. She worked for Heritage Estate Planning for 8 months in 2020. She is not just doing this to me. She is learning how to do it. She is learning the cracks in the system. I suspect I am not the first old woman she has tried to prune. Check her history. Use your skills. I put the paper down. My God, it made perfect sense. Sloane's sudden expertise in legal jargon, her connection to a notary, her knowledge of insurance policies. She had been working in the industry. She had been infiltrating the very systems designed to protect people like Eleanor. This was not a family drama. This was a serial crime. I packed the files back into the box. I took the photos, the letters, and the phone with the digital evidence. I did not leave anything behind. I walked out of the viewing room. Mr. Henderson was waiting for me. Did you find what you needed, miss? Johnson, he asked politely. I looked at him. I held the box under my arm. The conference room at the Missouri Department of Insurance Financial Crimes Unit was not designed for comfort. It was designed for interrogation. The walls were a pale institutional gray, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. I sat at a metal table that was currently covered with the anatomy of a crime. On one side were the pristine official records from Prairie Crest Life and Mutual. On the other side were the yellowed coffee-stained notes and digital printouts from my grandmother's safety deposit box. Across from me sat Detective Marissa Keene. She was a woman who looked like she had seen every variety of human greed and found them all boring. She wore a gun on her hip and a look of permanent skepticism on her face. Next to her was Assistant District Attorney Simone Hart. Hart was younger, sharper, and dressed in a suit that said she was ready to go to war. We had been in this room for 4 hours. We were building a timeline. It is beautiful in a sick kind of way, Detective Keene said, picking up a printout of the timeline we had constructed. She tapped the paper with a pen. Most fraudsters are messy. They get desperate. They grab cash and run. But your sister played the long game. She was farming your grandmother. Farming, I repeated. The word made my skin crawl. A Hart nodded. She adjusted her glasses. It is a term we use for elder abuse cases where the perpetrator does not just steal, once Hart said. They cultivate the victim. They isolate them. They take control of the mail. They take control of the phone. They harvest the assets slowly so no one alarm goes off at the bank. She pointed to a stack of files I had not seen before. These were not my grandmother's files. These were files the state had pulled. We looked into Silverbridge Care Advocates. Hart continued, the company where Sloan worked in 2019. It turns out she was not just an administrative assistant. She was a client liaison. Her job was to go into the homes of elderly clients and help them organize their paperwork for Medicare and Social Security. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. She had access, I said. Hart opened the top file. We have reached out to 3 former clients of Silverbridge who were assigned to Sloan. Hart said. She laid 3 photos on the table. They were elderly people. They looked frail. They looked like Grandma, Mrs. Higgins, Mr. Tao, and Mrs. Kowalski. Hart listed them. All of them reported small irregularities in their accounts during the time Sloan was their liaison. Checks missing from the back of the checkbook. Credit cards opened in their names that they did not remember applying for. Why wasn't she caught, I asked. Because the amounts were small, Keene explained. $200 here, $500 there, just enough to look like a billing error or a senior moment. And when the families asked questions, Sloan was the helpful advocate who promised to look into it. She managed the confusion. She gaslighted them. But with your grandmother, she got ambitious, Hart said. $2.3 million is not a small irregularity. That is retirement money. That is life-changing money. Hart turned to the whiteboard behind her. She had drawn a diagram. At the center was Sloan. Radiating out from her were lines connecting to Miles Denton, the notary, the 3 Silverbridge victims, and finally Eleanor Johnson. This is a Class A felony, Hart said. We are looking at multiple counts: wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery in the first degree, elder financial exploitation. If we stack these consecutively, she is looking at 15 to 20 years in a state penitentiary, and that is if she pleads out. If she takes this to trial, and we put these other victims on the stand, she will never walk free again. I looked at the diagram. I looked at the line connecting Sloan to Miles Denton. What about the notary, I asked. Keene smiled. It was a predatory smile. We picked up Mr. Denton an hour ago, she said. We played him the audio recording your grandmother made. The one where he haggles over the price of the stamp. He folded in about 10 minutes. He is currently writing a statement implicating Sloan in exchange for a lighter sentence. He gave us everything. The dates, the cash payments, the specific request to backdate the documents. I felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly followed by a wave of nausea. What about my mother, I asked. The room went quiet. Keene and Hart exchanged a look. We brought Diane Johnson in for questioning this morning, Hart said. She is in interview room B right now. Did she confess, I asked. Hart sighed. She opened a folder labeled Diane Johnson Interview Transcript. She is claiming ignorance, Hart said. Her defense is that she signed whatever Sloan put in front of her. She claims she never read the documents. She says she trusted her daughter and that she thought she was signing medical release forms or insurance updates. Is that true, I asked. Hart looked at me. You know your mother, Lucy. You tell me. Is she a criminal mastermind, or is she a coward? I thought about Diane. I thought about her need for peace at any cost. I thought about how she let Sloan run over everyone just to avoid a scene. She is a coward, I said. She probably did not know the details. She probably did not know it was $2.3 million, but she knew Sloan was up to something shady. She knew Grandma did not want to sign, and she signed as a witness anyway because it was easier than fighting with Sloan. Hart nodded. That matches her statement. She is weeping in there. She is playing the victim. She says she was manipulated by a sociopathic daughter. Will she be charged, I asked. Hart tapped the table. Technically, she committed perjury by witnessing a signature she knew was obtained under duress or was forged. But juries are soft on mothers who claim they were tricked by their children. Unless we find evidence that she took a cut of the money, we probably will not charge her as a co-conspirator. We will use her as a witness. We will put her on the stand and make her admit that she signed a lie. That is a punishment in itself, I said. For Diane Johnson, having to stand in public and admit she was a fool is worse than jail. It destroys her image. Exactly, Hart said. But we have one more thing, Keene interrupted. She seemed eager to get to the good part. She pulled a grainy black and white photograph from a folder. It looked like a still frame from a security camera. This is from a FedEx office and print center in Clayton, Keene said. It is dated December 14th, 2022. I looked at the photo. It showed a woman standing at a self-service fax machine. She was wearing a trench coat and large sunglasses, but there was no mistaking the posture. It was Sloan. On that date, Prairie Crest received a fax claiming to be from a law firm representing Eleanor Johnson demanding liquidation of the policy, Keene said. We traced the fax number back to this shop. Sloan was smart, Keene continued. She used a public machine. She paid cash. She thought she was anonymous. But she forgot one thing, what I asked. She used her own rewards card to pay for the $3 fax transmission, Keene said. She swiped her loyalty card to get the points. I almost laughed. It was so Sloan. She was committing $1 million felony, but she could not resist getting 20 points on her loyalty account. That ties her to the location at the exact time the fraudulent document was sent. Hart said, it destroys the defense that someone else stole her identity or that she was hacked. It puts the paper in her hand. Hart closed the file. The sound was final. We have enough, Ms. Johnson. We are issuing an arrest warrant for Sloan Johnson this afternoon. We are going to pick her up at her condo. I sat back in the metal chair. I felt exhausted. I felt drained. But mostly I felt lighter. Can I go, I asked. Hart nodded. You can go. Keep your phone on. We will need you for the arraignment. And Lucy. Yes. You did good. Your grandmother would be proud. I stood up. I gathered my purse. I left the files on the table. They did not belong to me anymore. They belonged to the state of Missouri. I walked out of the secure area and into the main lobby of the police station. It was busy. Officers were walking in and out with suspects. People were waiting on benches looking miserable. I pushed through the double doors and walked out into the afternoon sun. The heat of the day had broken, and there was a cool breeze blowing. I took a deep breath. Lucy. The voice was low and tight. I froze. I turned my head toward the visitor parking lot. Sloan was leaning against my Ford Focus. She did not look like the woman who had glided into the funeral yesterday. She was wearing yoga pants and a sweatshirt. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was not wearing makeup, and without it she looked older. She looked haggard. She had obviously been tracking me. She must have seen my car. Or maybe Diane had texted her from the bathroom during a break in the interrogation. I walked toward her. I did not run. I did not flinch. I was an auditor, and she was just a bad account. What are you doing here, Sloan? I asked. My voice was calm. It surprised even me. Sloan pushed herself off the car. She crossed her arms. Mom texted me, she said. She said you are in there with the financial crimes unit. She said you gave them Grandma's safety deposit box. I did. I said. Sloan let out a short, incredulous laugh. She took a step toward me. Are you insane, Lucy? Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are blowing up the family. You are going to send Mom to jail. Mom is not going to jail, I said. Mom is going to be a witness. You are the one going to jail, Sloan. Sloan's eyes narrowed. The charm was gone. The sisterly concern was gone. There was only the predator. You think you are so smart, she hissed. You think because you found some old papers you can take me down. You have no idea how this works. I have friends. I have lawyers. I have a recording of you bribing Miles Denton, I said. Sloan stopped. Her face went pale. I have the emails, I continued. I have the fax log from Clayton where you used your rewards card. I have the files from Silverbridge. And I have the timeline that Grandma built for 2 years while you were treating her like an idiot. Sloan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach. Grandma knew Sloan, I said. She knew everything. She played you. Sloan's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She took another step toward me. It was a threatening move, a physical intimidation tactic that she had used on me since we were children. Give me the key, she said. Her voice was a low growl. You go back in there and you tell them it was a mistake. You tell them you misunderstood. You fix this, Lucy, or I swear to God I will ruin you. I will tell everyone you manipulated Grandma. I will sue you for every penny you have." I looked at her. I looked at the desperation in her eyes. I realized she was terrified. The walls were closing in and she knew it. "I am not afraid of you anymore," I said. I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space for the first time in my life. "And you are not going to sue anyone, Sloane. You are going to prison." Sloane lunged. It was a desperate, clumsy movement. She reached for my arm, maybe to shake me, maybe to hit me, but before she could touch me, a siren chirped. We both looked toward the street. A black SUV, with government plates, pulled into the lot. 2 uniformed officers and Detective Keene got out. Sloane looked at them. She looked at me. "Run," I said softly. "It won't matter, but you can try." Sloane did not run. She slumped against my car. The fight went out of her instantly. She looked small. She looked pathetic. Detective Keene walked up to us. She had handcuffs in her hand. "Sloane Johnson," she said, "you are under arrest for first-degree forgery and elder financial abuse. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Sloane looked at me one last time as the cuffs clicked onto her wrists. There was no anger left in her eyes, just a profound confusion. She could not understand how the script had flipped. She could not understand how the extra in her movie had suddenly become the director. I watched them put her in the back of the SUV. I watched the car drive away. I stood alone in the parking lot. I took my phone out of my pocket. I deleted the text thread with Sloane. Then I got into my car. I had to go home. I had to feed my cat. I had to get ready for work tomorrow. I was still Lucy Johnson. I was still a freight auditor. But the ledger was finally balanced. The text message from my mother arrived at 3 in the afternoon. It was brief, and it pretended that the previous 48 hours had not happened. "Dinner tonight at 6. We need to talk like a family. Please come. Pot roast." I stared at the screen. I was sitting in my apartment in Maplewood, surrounded by copies of the evidence I had turned over to the state. I knew exactly what this was. It was not a dinner invitation. It was a summons to a settlement negotiation. 24 hours earlier, I had watched the police put handcuffs on my sister in a parking lot. I had watched her get driven away in the back of a black SUV. But the legal system moves in strange ways for people like Sloane. She had posted bond. My mother had likely emptied her savings account or maxed out a credit card to pay the 10% needed to get her out. Sloane was back on the street pending her arraignment. I should not have gone. Any lawyer would have told me to stay home and let the district attorney handle it. But I needed to see them. I needed to see if there was anything left of the family I thought I had, or if it was all just rot underneath a thin layer of paint. I packed a fresh manila folder. I put 3 specific documents inside. I did not bring the originals. I am an auditor. I never bring the originals to a meeting with the subject of the audit. I drove to Kirkwood. The house I grew up in looked the same as always. The lawn was manicured. The porch light was on. It projected an image of suburban stability that I now knew was a lie. I walked in. The smell of pot roast and carrots filled the air. It was a smell that used to mean safety to me. Now it smelled like a bribe. Diane was in the kitchen. She was wearing an apron over her clothes, and she was stirring gravy with a frantic energy. She looked at me and gave me a tight, brittle smile. "Hi, honey," she said. "I am so glad you came." She did not hug me. She gestured toward the dining room. "Sloane is already seated," she said. I walked into the dining room. Sloane was sitting at her usual spot. She had showered and changed since the arrest. She was wearing a soft cream-colored sweater and her hair was brushed loose. She looked vulnerable. She looked like the victim. It was a costume change designed for a specific audience. I sat down across from her. I placed the manila folder on the table next to my plate. Sloane looked at the folder. Her eyes flickered with fear, but she covered it quickly. "Hi, Lucy," she said softly. I did not answer. I just unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. Diane bustled in carrying the platter of meat. She served us. She poured wine. She chattered about the weather and the neighbors and the price of green beans. She was trying to suffocate the tension with banality. We ate in silence for 5 minutes. The only sound was the scraping of silverware on china. Finally, Diane put her fork down. Okay, she said. We are all here. We are a family. We need to resolve this. Sloane took a sip of wine. She looked at me with wide, watery eyes. Lucy, she began. I want to apologize. I continued to cut my meat. I did not look up. I am listening, I said. I am sorry about the funeral, Sloane said. I was a mess. I was grieving and I was not thinking straight. When I saw those papers, I just panicked. I thought they were just old junk that would upset Mom. I should not have thrown them away. It was disrespectful to Grandma. She paused, waiting for me to absolve her. I put my fork down. I looked her in the eye. Are you apologizing for throwing away the paper, I asked? Or are you apologizing for trying to change the beneficiary on the policy 9 times in 4 years? The room went dead silent. The air conditioning unit kicked on with a low hum. Sloane's face hardened. The vulnerable act slipped. I do not know what you are talking about, she said. Diane jumped in. Lucy, please. Sloane explained it to me. She was just trying to help Grandma organize her estate. Grandma was getting confused in her old age. Sloane was just trying to make sure the assets were protected. Protected from whom, I asked. From the state, Diane said. From taxes. You know how it is. I reached for the folder on the table. I know exactly how it is, I said. Because I have the timeline. I opened the folder. I took out the first document. It was the spreadsheet Renee Caldwell had printed for me at the insurance office. I slid it across the table toward Diane. This is a log of every attempted change, I said. Look at the dates, Mom. They started 4 years ago. Grandma was not confused 4 years ago. She was still doing her own taxes. Diane looked at the paper, but she did not read it. She pushed it away. Lucy, why are you doing this? She asked. Her voice was trembling. Why did you go to the police? Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? The neighbors saw the police car. The neighbors saw your sister in handcuffs. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had taught me to be polite and quiet. I went to the police because a crime was committed, I said. It is a misunderstanding, Diane insisted. If you just call that detective, what was her name? Detective Keene. If you just call her and tell her that you gave her the wrong impression, they will drop it. We can handle this internally. We can split the money. I stopped. I looked at Diane. I never told you the detective's name, I said. Diane froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. You just said Detective Keene? I said slowly. I never mentioned her name to you. I only spoke to her yesterday afternoon. Diane looked at Sloane. Sloane looked down at her plate. Sloane told you, I said. Sloane told you everything she learned during her booking. You knew exactly who I was talking to. You knew I was working with the state. Diane flushed a deep blotchy red. She is your sister, Lucy, Diane shouted, slamming her hand on the table. You are trying to send your sister to prison over money. It is not about the money, I said. I pulled the second document from the folder. It was the power of attorney form, the one with the forged signature of my grandmother and the real signature of my witness. I slid it toward Diane. Is this your signature, Mom? I asked. Diane looked at the document. She went pale. I asked you a question, I said. Is that your signature witnessing a document that gave Sloane total control over Grandma's life? Diane stared at the paper. She looked trapped. I did not read it, she whispered. Sloane put it in front of me. She said it was for the hospital. She said Grandma needed me to sign it so she could get her medication. You are lying, I said. It says power of attorney right at the top in bold letters. You signed it because it was easier than asking questions. You signed it because Sloane told you to. Sloane stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the wood floor. Stop attacking her, Sloane screamed. She threw her napkin onto the table. You have no right to come in here and act like a judge, Lucy. You were not there. Sloane leaned over the table. Her face was twisted with rage. The mask was fully off now. Where were you for the last 5 years, she yelled. You were in your little apartment in Maplewood. You were at your boring job. Who was driving Grandma to her appointments? Me. Who was buying her groceries? Me. Who was sitting there listening to her tell the same stories about the machine shop 1,000 times? Me. I watched her. I watched her rewrite history in real time. You were there to steal from her, I said calmly. I earned that money, Sloane screamed. She struck her chest with her fist. I earned it. I put in the time I dealt with the smell of that old house. I dealt with her stubbornness. You think you deserve $2 million just because she liked you better? Just because you were the quiet one? She was panting now. Her chest was heaving. I was the one who took care of her, Sloane spat. I deserved that policy. She should have signed it over to me years ago. I was just correcting a mistake. Diane was crying now. She had her face buried in her hands. Sloane, sit down, Diane sobbed. Lucy, please stop this. I did not stop. I reached into the folder for the third document. It was the copy of the notary log from Miles Denton, the one that showed the bribe. You did not take care of her, I said. I stood up. I picked up the paper and held it up. You hired a notary to fake her signature while she was in the hospital with pneumonia, I said. You sat in her kitchen and called her a vegetable while she was in the next room listening. Sloane's eyes widened. How did you know that? She whispered. Because she recorded you, I said. I dropped the paper onto the table. It landed on top of the pot roast. She recorded everything, Sloane. She recorded the phone calls. She recorded your visits. She recorded you bribing Miles Denton. She did not sign anything. She built a case against you. Sloane looked at the paper. She looked at me. For the first time, she looked truly terrified. She recorded me, she asked. Her voice was barely audible. For 2 years, I said, she knew you were coming for her, and she knew you would try to gaslight me. So she left me the tapes. Sloane sank back into her chair. She looked like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Diane looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. Lucy, please, Diane begged. She is your sister. We can fix this. If you just testify that Grandma was confused, if you just say that the recordings might be manipulated, we can save her. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had witnessed the forgery. The woman who had let her own mother be hunted in her own home. I am not going to save her, I said, and I am not going to save you, Mom. I looked at Sloane. You screamed that I was not there. I said, you are right. I was not there every day. But do you know why Grandma left it to me? Sloane looked up at me with hatred. Because you were her favorite, she hissed. No, I said, because I never looked at her and saw a payday. I leaned across the table. You are not being treated unfairly, Sloane. You are not a victim. You are just angry because for the first time in your life you were not the chosen one. You cannot stand the fact that the little quiet sister beat you. Sloane grabbed her wine glass. Her knuckles were white. For a second I thought she was going to throw it at me. Get out, she said. Get out of this house. I picked up my purse. I am leaving, I said. But I think you have company coming. What are you talking about? Diane asked. There was a heavy knock at the front door. Boom, boom, boom. It was not a polite social knock. It was the knock of authority. It was the knock that demands to be answered. Sloane froze. She looked at the door. She looked at the clock. Who is that? She whispered. I walked toward the hallway. I opened the front door. Detective Keene stood on the porch. Behind her were 2 federal agents wearing windbreakers with FBI printed on the back. Ms. Johnson, Keene said to me, nodding. She stepped past me into the house. The federal agents followed her. They walked into the dining room. Sloane Johnson. Keene said loudly. Sloane stood up. She knocked her wine glass over. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like blood. I am out on bail, Sloane stammered. I paid the bond. You cannot arrest me again. This is not for the state charges, Keene said. One of the federal agents stepped forward. Sloane Johnson, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Due to the flight risk associated with the offshore accounts we discovered this afternoon, your bail has been revoked. Sloane looked at Diane. Mom, she screamed. Mom, do something. Diane sat there. She did not move. She stared at the spilled wine. She realized that her strategy of keeping the peace had finally run out of road. There was no rug large enough to sweep this under. The agents grabbed Sloane. They did not be gentle this time. They pulled her arms behind her back. I stood in the hallway and watched. Sloane looked at me as they dragged her out. She did not scream at me this time. She just looked at me with a look of pure shock. I watched them take her out into the night. I looked back at the dining room. My mother was sitting alone at the table, weeping over a cold pot roast. I did not say goodbye. I walked out to my car. The air was cool and clean. Grandma was right. The truth was brutal. But it was the only thing that was real. The sentencing hearing took place 3 months later in a courtroom that smelled of lemon polish and old anxiety. It was the same smell I had encountered in the insurance office, but here it was heavier. The air was thick with the weight of judgments that were about to be passed. Because of the amount of money involved and the sheer audacity of the scheme, the local media had descended on the St. Louis County Courthouse. The headline, "Granddaughter Schemes for Grandma's Millions," was too good to pass up. They sat in the back row with their notepads and their silent cameras. They were hungry for a tragedy, but I was there for the ending. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. I was alone. Diane was in the building, but she was sitting on the opposite side 3 rows back. She wore large sunglasses and a scarf wrapped around her head, like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi. She had not spoken to me since the night of the pot roast. She had not visited Sloan in holding. She was doing what Diane always did, which was surviving by making herself invisible. Assistant District Attorney Simone Hart stood up. She looked formidable. She walked the judge through the evidence with the precision of a surgeon. "Your Honor," she began, "this was not a moment of weakness. This was a campaign." She projected the timeline onto the screen. 9 attempts, Hart said. 9 separate attempts over 4 years. We have the rejected forms. We have the fake notary stamp found in the defendant's possession. We have the security footage from the fax shop in Clayton showing the defendant transmitting a fraudulent death claim while the victim was still alive. Hart paused and looked at Sloan. Sloan was sitting at the defense table. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that washed out her complexion. Her hair was dull, but her eyes were still sharp. They darted around the room looking for an exit, looking for a sympathetic face, looking for anyone who would buy the story she was selling. But the most damning evidence, Hart continued, is the voice of the victim herself. She played the audio clip one last time. My grandmother's voice filled the courtroom clear and steady. "I am telling you, Sloan, I do not understand these papers." And then Sloan's voice, cold and manipulative. "Just sign the damn paper, Grandma." The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, listened with a face of stone. When it was Sloan's turn to speak, her lawyer tried to paint a picture of a devoted granddaughter who had simply been overwhelmed by the administrative burden of caregiving. He talked about the stress. He talked about the complex nature of estate law. Then Sloan stood up. She did not cry this time. She did not perform the hysterics she had used at the funeral. She looked directly at me. "I loved her," she said. Her voice was quiet. "I was the one holding her hand when she had the stroke, Lucy. You were at work. I was the one who heard her last words. She asked for me. She did not ask for you." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was a calculated strike. She knew my biggest guilt was not being there at the very end. She was trying to weaponize my grief to save herself. But I looked at her, and I did not feel the guilt anymore. I felt pity. She did not ask for you, I thought. She prepared a case against you. Then came the testimony that changed the entire temperature of the room. Graham Whitaker, the branch director of Prairie Crest Life and Mutual, was called to the stand. He looked nervous. He adjusted his tie. He swore to tell the truth. Ada Hart asked him a simple question. "Mr. Whitaker, why did your company allow these fraudulent attempts to continue for 4 years? Why did you not simply close the account or report it to the police after the first forgery?" Whitaker took a deep breath. He looked at the judge. "We wanted to, Your Honor," he said. "After the second attempt in 2021, our legal department advised us to terminate the policy and place the funds in a court registry. We wanted to wash our hands of the Johnson family drama. It was a liability. Then why didn't you?" Hart asked. Whitaker looked at me. "Because Eleanor Johnson threatened us," he said. A murmur went through the courtroom. My grandmother threatened a billion-dollar insurance company. Whitaker reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. It was protected in a plastic sleeve. "She came to my office," Whitaker said. "She sat in my chair. She handed me this letter. She said, 'Mr. Whitaker, if you close this file to save yourself a headache, I will report you to the state insurance commissioner for negligence.' I will tell them that you allowed a predator to access my data. I will release the recordings I have made of your staff being rude to me." Whitaker paused. She told us that we were going to help her. She said, "You are going to keep this policy open. You are going to reject the forms, but you are going to keep them. You are going to build the paper trail. Because if you do not help me catch her, I will make sure you lose your license." I stared at Whitaker. My grandmother had not just trapped Sloan. She had trapped the insurance company. She had forced them to be her private investigators. She knew that if she went to the police alone, it would be her word against Sloan's. But if she had Prairie Crest Life and Mutual documenting every crime the police would have to listen, she was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant. Whitaker looked at the floor. "She gave us no choice," he said. "So we kept the file open. We let Sloan think she was making progress so she would keep incriminating herself. Eleanor Johnson ran this investigation, Your Honor. We just followed her orders." The judge looked at the letter. She looked at Whitaker. She looked at Sloan. "The defendant thought she was manipulating a confused old woman," Judge Patterson said. "It appears she was the one being played." The sentencing was swift. Sloan stood up. The judge looked down at her over her glasses. "Sloan Johnson, you preyed on the vulnerable. You used your family connection as a weapon. You corrupted a notary. You attempted to steal over $2 million. The gavel came down. I sentence you to 8 years in state prison followed by 5 years of probation. You are hereby permanently barred from holding any employment in the financial sector or the elder care industry. You will pay restitution to the state for the cost of the investigation." Sloan did not scream. She did not cry. She just slumped. The air went out of her. The reality of 8 years in a cell hit her like a physical blow. As the bailiffs moved to take her away, she looked back one last time. She looked at Diane. Diane did not look up. She was staring at her hands. Sloan looked at me. "Lucy," she whispered. I did not look away. I nodded once. It was a goodbye. They let her out. The heavy door clicked shut. The courtroom began to clear. The reporters rushed out to file their stories. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. A heart walked over to me. She shook my hand. "It is over." "Lucy," she said, "you can sleep now." I walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway I saw my mother. Diane was standing near the water fountain. She looked old. The carefully constructed facade of her life had cracked. Her daughter was a convict. Her reputation in Kirkwood was destroyed. The neighbors would talk about this for 20 years. She saw me. She took a step toward me. "Lucy," she said. Her voice was weak. "Are you coming home? I can make dinner." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. She was afraid of being alone. She wanted to pretend that we could just go back to the way things were. She wanted me to fill the void Sloan had left. "I cannot come to dinner, Mom," I said. "Lucy, please," Diane said. "You are all I have left." I shook my head. "You have yourself." "Mom," I said, "and you have the truth. I suggest you get comfortable with both of them." I walked past her. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. I drove to the bank one last time. I had one envelope left to open. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Gateway Federal. I pulled out the letter marked "Read Last." I opened it. "My dearest Lucy, if you are reading this, then the noise has stopped. The lawyers are gone. The judge has spoken, and you are sitting there with a lot of money and a heavy heart. I know you feel bad about Sloan. I know you feel bad about your mother. You have a soft heart, Lucy. That is your strength, but do not let it be your weakness. I did not leave you this money so you could be rich. I left you this money so you could be free. Free from them. Free from the need to please people who do not see you. Free from the fear of the future. But I have one condition. Do not become bitter. Do not let this fight turn you into stone. You are an auditor, Lucy. You look for the truth, but remember to look for the good, too. Live your life. Buy a car that does not rattle. Eat the good chocolate. And every now and then look at the fine print for the people who cannot read it themselves. Love, Grandma. I cried then. I sat in my Ford Focus, and I wept until I was empty. 6 months later, I sat on the front porch of a new house. It was not a mansion. It was a sensible brick bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. It had good bones. I was not working at Redwood Lane anymore. I had resigned 2 weeks after the trial. Instead, I had started something new. It was a small office in a community center downtown. I called it the Eleanor Project. It was not a big operation. It was just me and 2 retired paralegals. We offered free document review for seniors. We looked at their contractor bids. We looked at their insurance policies. We looked at the confusing letters they got from the government. We read the fine print. Last week we caught a roofer trying to overcharge a widow by $4,000. Yesterday we stopped a phishing scam that would have drained a retired teacher's savings. It was not glamorous work. It was quiet. It was detailed. It was exactly the kind of work Grandma would have loved. I picked up my coffee cup. It was a crisp autumn morning. The leaves were turning gold and red. On the table next to me was the original insurance policy. I had laminated it. I used it as a coaster. It was worth $2.3 million. And yes, the money was nice. The money bought the house. The money funded the project. But as I sat there watching the sun come up, I realized the money was the least valuable thing she had given me. Sloan had wanted the payout. She had wanted the lifestyle. But Eleanor had given me something else. She had given me a spine. She had taught me that I was not the invisible sister. I was not the extra in someone else's movie. I was the one who saw the truth. I was the one who kept the receipts. I picked up the laminated policy. I traced the signature at the bottom, the real signature, spidery and sharp and undeniable. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered. I took a sip of coffee. I was ready for the day. I was ready to read the fine print, and for the first time in 34 years, I was ready to be seen. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey for Lucy, but she finally found her voice and her justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop your location in the comments below, because I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel Helena Revenge Stories and hitting that like button. Also, please smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need to hear that the truth always wins. See you in the next video. I found everything I said. I walked out of the bank. The sun was high in the sky now. It was a beautiful day in St. Louis, the kind of day where people went to the park or sat on patios drinking iced tea. But I was not going to the park. I checked my phone. I had a missed call from Agent Miller. I called him back. "Agent Miller," I said as soon as he picked up. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "we are assembling the team. I am at Gateway Federal," I said. "I have the box. But Agent Miller, I have something better than the box." "What do you have?" he asked. "I have audio," I said. "I have a recording of my sister paying a notary to forge a document, and I have reason to believe she has done this to other people. She worked at Silverbridge Care Advocates." There was a silence on the line. Then I heard the sound of typing. "Silverbridge," the agent said. "We have 2 open complaints regarding Silverbridge. Low-level theft, unsubstantiated. Substantiate them," I said, "because I am bringing you the link." I hung up. I walked to my car. I placed the evidence on the seat next to me. My sister wanted a war. She wanted to play games with paper and ink. She thought she was the smartest person in the room because she could shout the loudest and smile the brightest. But she forgot the most important rule of accounting. Every transaction leaves a trace, and I had just found the ledger.